This video, I'm going to talk a little bit about Salvador Allende, who he was, what he did, and how it's related to the Cold War that occurred between the United States and the Soviet Union. So, to give you some background, Allende was a Chilean socialist, a politician, and a physician, and he served as the president of Chile from 1970 until 1973. So, leading up to this, he actually had ran for president three different times in the 1950s and the early 1960s, and he lost all of those times. But in 1970, when he ran, there was a close three-way race, and he barely inched out ahead of his competitors to win that election. And in winning that election, he actually became the first ever Marxist to be elected in a country with liberal democracy in Latin America, which was a pretty historical event to happen. So, in terms of the Cold War, we have the two sides. The Soviet Union's looking at this, what's going on in Chile, and Allende being elected, and they're in favor of it. They like what they're seeing. They like to see socialist and communist views expand, especially if it's being closer to the United States. So the United States is looking at this and thinking the exact opposite. They don't want any rising influence of socialism or communism in South America, and they definitely don't want it spreading or getting any closer to them and their country. So what they do is as you may have watched in other videos, and if you watch the Pinochet video, you'll be familiar with this. The United States provided military aid and assistance and weapons to a brutal dictator named Augusto Pinochet. And basically, they gave him all that ammunition and they told him to completely take over the government in Chile, get Allende out of power, because they knew that Pinochet completely opposed communism. So they took advantage of that. And September 11th, 1973, this is when the brutal military coup happened. Tanks were rolling through the streets, soldiers were walking through the streets. Pinochet suspended the Constitution and the Chilean Congress, and he sought out people who had communist and socialist views, and he tortured them and he murdered them. And it was a very brutal point in time. So during this military coup, unfortunately, Allende ended up committing suicide before Pinochet could get to him, and that marked the end of his career as Chilean president from 1970 to 1973. But again, in terms of the Cold War, the United States looked at this event in his election and did not want any more of a socialism or communism political ideology spreading closer to them. So they took military action and they provided a brutal dictator with the means to do so.